And when I said that, I meant it. And I don't know if because I knew those other things were in play, maybe, I don't know. That was really hard for me to say. That's really hard for me to admit right now because, I wrote a letter and I didn't put that in the letter. But I want you to know because I think it's important. It's important to talk about. And of course, when other people heard that, because, we're all sharing stories on my kid's doing this and my kid's doing that. And I'm like, well, my kid wants to move back in. And I told him if he didn't have all these things done, he had to go to a shelter. Hey friend, and welcome to the Stoic Dahlia podcast, a digital retreat for women seeking to live that good life. And this is your invitation to join me, your host B, as each week we deep dive into thought-provoking narratives that will inspire you to question conventional thinking, seek greater clarity and purpose in your life. And it's all rooted within Stoic philosophy. You see, this isn't your typical self-help, self-love, self-development podcast, yet an unconventional but refreshing approach where ancient wisdom meets modern living, and it all speaks directly to women. You ready? Let's go. Hey there. I just wanted to say real quickly, thank you for joining me today for this 2-part episode where I bare my soul and discuss with you one of the most personal and sometimes painful topics in my life. We have a lot to get into here. Now, this episode is for anyone who wants to explore the complexities of familial relationships, to gain the courage and be able to say, let's sit down. We need to have a conversation. In this very raw and heartfelt recording, I share a side of myself that very few have seen, revealing my challenges and my insights as a daughter, dealing with my own issues with my parents, a woman struggling with societal expectations of how a mother should be, and how all that noise has informed my parenting. I'm going to read to you a letter that I wrote to my adult son, which to this day is still the most read article on my website. We're going to delve into the 4 themes that it addresses, exposing controversy that I dealt with in my decisions and from the ever-judging parent era that we live today, as well as explain how Stoic philosophy has helped navigate me through this stage. Stay tuned. Thank you for joining me and welcome to today's show. I wanted to start this episode off by reading a letter that I wrote to my adult son, and it works out perfectly because normally when I post my blog post, I record audio so that way people can choose how they want to get the content. And as I was preparing for today, I realized I never recorded this. So you will be hearing this for the first time. And then, of course, if you read it, but you're hearing this for the first time. But to give you a little bit of context, a couple years ago, my adult son decided to leave the nest. And it wasn't a choice that he easily came to, nor was it his first choice. And so I felt there was a lot of controversy around this. And it was not just between me and him, but it was even from other parents, about how I came to the decisions that I did to help him make decisions. And then there was some tension in between him and I didn't want him to leave and things were unsaid. So let's get into this, shall we? Here we go. My dearest love, we have come to the point where we must say goodbye, not to our relationship, but to the closing of a chapter as you transition from childhood to adulthood, moving out from your parents and on to the next chapter of your life. As you have grown, our relationship too must evolve. So I was hoping to have an honest conversation with you. Making the choice to go out on your own and craft the story of what's to come in your life was no easy feat for either of us. I'm sure you would have stayed longer if I had made things less complicated for you, but I did not want that. And trust me, son, you wouldn't have wanted that either. Although we are past the rough patches and things between you and me seem fine on the surface, I can't help but think some things were left unsaid, or at least left misunderstood. I strongly believe that communication is the key factor behind strong parent-child relationships. When parents and children are not communicating, it can lead to serious emotional hurt and weaken bonds between them, and I do not want that for you and me. As you know, my father died when I was 12. And out of all the things he might have told me throughout our short time together, this is the one thing I remember him saying. Lala, I have things to talk to you about when you're a grown woman. Things you cannot understand right now, even if you tried. But it will be a conversation between us about things I need you to understand about me. We never made it to that talk. After he died, I spent years in agony, so upset with him for the things that he did, the way he parented me or the lack of, and for leaving me with so many unanswered questions. It wasn't until I was 33 that my mother found and gave me a whole bunch of his paperwork and asked me to go through it to see if I wanted anything or if we should just throw it away. In the piles, I found his journaling. Notebooks and pages on his accounts of his addiction, his depression, and how he viewed his life. And do you know what was the most bizarre thing about it all? At the time he wrote all of that, he was the exact same age as me when I read it. I finally heard him. I saw him for who he was. A broken man who so desperately wished he wasn't. Almost instantly, all that pain melted away. We finally had our conversation that day. My goal in writing this letter to you is for us to have a conversation, an honest conversation. I want the opportunity to tell you why I can never be the mother you want me to be, but instead how I vow to be the mother you deserve. Let's have a conversation. You may not remember this, or perhaps you don't even know this at all. But we made a deal before we both took our places on this earth. We have a contract. And in it, it says that I am here to help you to seek knowledge and truth, to differentiate good from evil and right from wrong, to teach you how to make decisions and problem solve, not to do it for you. To teach you wisdom, temperance, justice, and fortitude. The very morals that I literally have tattooed on my spine, to which are my foundation. They are to be passed on to you from 0 to 18, and after that, I must gracefully stand back and let you go. Our contract contained an agreement between us too. Not only would you learn lessons from me, but you would also teach me so many things too. I promised to love you hard, and so I parented you tough. But I didn't just up and decide that I would purposely make your life difficult. A lot of the choices and decisions in raising you came from experiences that shaped me. I know where you came from, but you don't know where I come from. You see, son, just because having a baby instantly gave me a new name tag with mother written on it, that did not mean that I knew how to be a mom, or what that even meant yet. The day they let me take you home, I remember I wanted to cry. I never really held a baby before you. They put you in my arms and gave me instructions for you about your umbilical cord and your feeding, along with a little card that was to be filled out with all your vaccinations. And then they said, bye. I didn't even manage my own medical files yet. They were all still at home with my mom. So there I was, scared as hell. A baby with a baby. A lot of how I learned to be a mother was by jumping into the nitty-gritty with you. And trust me, kid, I just heard myself say that out loud, and it sounds crazy. That'd be like you jumping on a motorcycle and hitting the roads in Pinellas County without having any mastery over it or even guidance. All you have is trial and error. Well, that's pretty much parenting if you think about it. But to be fair, my shaping wasn't solely from you. I did draw from my own mother. Naturally, that is where our parenting skills start from, modeling what we see growing up. And you know what? I was better off just doing the trial by error thing with you. Promise. So my mother and I were never on the same page regarding how I was supposed to take care of you. I may not have gotten my maternal instinct wings the minute you popped out like other women. But the one thing I knew for sure was you were not going to grow up the same way as me. You were not going to feel, see, or hear any of the things that I did. Did your father and I make mistakes? Yup. Did you see and hear some shit? Yup. But I promise you, none of that came close to anything like my childhood. You see, for a very long time, I did not know what healthy relationships looked like. And as an adult, you can even see the disharmonious dynamics between my siblings and me. The way I chose to design my parenting style and relationship with you stemmed from taking all the flaws from what I perceived to be a broken system. I especially wanted to foster a healthier atmosphere with the container that you and Cade share as brothers. And I'll be quite honest with you, I'm still not sure what that looks like exactly. But what I am damn sure of is I am steering you both in the right direction. The cold, hard truth, son, no parents are perfect or without flaws. They can't get it right all the time, especially if they're making something out of nothing. A lot of us are wounded children trying to reparent ourselves at the same time we are trying to parent our kids. We make rules as we go because some of us are creating something out of nothing. As I hit a new age and maturity level, I have worked through shame from the poor choices that I know I made for you in the past. And I am constantly course correcting as I walk with you toward your future. And as you remind me of certain mistakes I made last year and the year before, I am going to honestly tell you that my parenting style is always going to be ever changing. I am not afraid to admit that I am still learning about the world, about myself, trying to work out my own issues from my own parents. The reality is, it can take a lifetime for someone to truly understand themselves, and they may not even get to that point until they are close to death. I know that you don't always agree or understand my choices, and shit, there are other parents who have actually verbalized they are on your side. But I assure you, my son, I have meditated on them hard. They have been methodically thought out and designed to work for you, not against you. And if you take anything from this letter, I hope it's that. Giving you tough love these last few years has been the hardest part of parenting you. And yes, I have struggled with some of the options that I have presented to you. I know there have been times when you have felt that my decisions were cold-hearted even. But only one thought keeps me strong in my stance, and I always come back to this. Someday you will be living in a reality where I no longer exist. My job is to teach you how to live in this world without me. That's the goal. That's the win. And if I fail, I am not sure I could handle the disappointment that I would hold for myself in leaving you vulnerable in this world. Look at me. I'm not even 40 yet, and I no longer have parents. I am at an unusual age to be parentless, but it happens. So if me forcing you to problem solve, to learn how to ask others for help, pay bills, or make you choose hard over easy is not your idea of an ideal mom, I'm sorry, but I'd choose to be that woman over and over again. And if breaking generational cycles meant making a lot of mistakes as I carried you in a different direction, I'd gladly make those mistakes again. And if you know that you can do better than me, my love, I 100% stand behind you on that. I want you to have a better life than I did. I want you to be better than me. But you know what? I already think that you are. I'm so proud of you and proud of the steps you have taken in challenging your own self today. And I'm finding, as you have taken over the decision making for yourself, that I too don't always agree with your choices. And child, I swear I'm working hard to keep my mouth shut unless you ask for my help. But I suppose that is to be saved for another day, another conversation. I love you, my son. as ever, yo mama. Oof. So we have a lot to dive into today. So I'm going to go over a little bit because it's obviously nobody knows the conversation that took place between my son and I. So we'll go over the riff a little bit and then how it became controversial outside of that. So when my son wanted to move back in, he was 20 and he had lived with me before. His father and I had 50-50 custody, and luckily we lived only 7 minutes away from each other. In his latter years of his teenhood, we started to bump heads a little, which I think is natural. I've talked to my girlfriends and they have daughters, but it's still, I think it's just nature of the beast, right? So we started to bump heads a little bit, and, it was tense for a little bit because not only, was it just him, we also had a 5-year-old. So I'm having to switch back and forth with being a parent to a 5-year-old and then being a parent to, at this time, he was 19. And I think it made me very irritable, and I can't imagine, because I'm trying, the attention that you give a 5-year-old is different from the 19-year-old, and the way that you speak to a 5-year-old is different than the 9-year-old. So I think it was really, really hard on him too. And with a 5-year-old, you can understand and you have more patience because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're saying. But the expectations that you put on the 19-year-old, you expect, and this isn't, looking back now, this isn't always true because in their mind, they're thinking different from you. What's big to them is not big to you. What's important to them is not important to you. And what's right or wrong, and I didn't realize that at the time. So I had these expectations. Well, you do know what's right and wrong. So it caused a lot between us. And he wasn't a disrespectful kid. We disagreed on a lot of things, but at the end of the day, he wasn't disrespectful. So, he was on his way to work one time and he had found a stray dog, which is a total hell no in here. No animals, not yet. And he fell in love with his dog instantly and he wanted to keep the dog. And I was like, we cannot have this dog. And so he talked with his dad, had a conversation with his dad, and they already had a dog and they love dogs and, they're animal people. So they said, sure, you can move in. So it was at that time he decided to move out full time. And it sucked. It hurt a little bit because I'm used to seeing him more than what I ended up seeing him after he moved. But like I said, he was only 7 minutes away. And I needed that time. I think I needed that space to really reflect and think back on, okay, you've got to change the way that you're parenting, or you've got to change the way that you're communicating with this kid because it is not working out. And I think that's when it hit me, as our children grow, so does the way that we come at them. So does the way that we approach them. And him being him, I think falling in love with that dog and moving in with his dad, I think that was his way of saying, I can't live here anymore. We keep arguing and this isn't working out for me either. And like I said, he wasn't a disrespectful child. So I think that was his way, and that's okay. And I don't even think that we really talked about that part. So I've never really validated, but this is just what I'm thinking. So a little bit after that, his father and his stepmother decided that they wanted to downsize and they were going to move to a new area. And so that's when it became on the table because he had a job out here and he had relationships out here. Hey, can I move in with you? And he had not been living here for a while, and we started to already have a new relationship, and it was different when we were together and it wasn't so tense all the time. So it was working, and all I could think about is if he moved back in, it was going to be difficult again. And so I thought really, really hard. And, I told him, I said, I need to think, I'm never going to tell you no, but things are going to have to change. Things cannot go back to the way that they were. And so my husband and I, we came up with a contract, and nothing from a lawyer or anything. It was just something that we created. And in it, we put very specific expectations and boundaries. I mean, I guess kids would call it rules, right? But, looking at it today, it's boundaries. And so the other part of it was he was a He's a 19-year-old man, young adult, young man, living with 2 parental figures, but it's just 3 of them. That's 3 adults in the house. So their lifestyle is very, very different. They can tolerate certain things that over in this household, you have a 5-year-old and 2 adult parents. And this 5-year-old will, I heard a noise. What was that? I'm thirsty. Can I have any excuse to get out of bed and to get out of their schedule? They're going to do that. And so, if you have or know any older teens, their schedule is 100% opposite of yours. They're owls. And so that was part of the contract, was you can't hoot and holler at, in the middle of the night with your video game, or, if you want to take a shower at 4 a.m, you cannot be singing in the shower. You can't slam doors at a certain time. And it sounds so strict, but if you've had a small child, and like mine, and those of you that know me, you know what I'm talking about. This child has ears of the dog. He hears anything. Somebody whispers, I had to come down and see what happened. I have to check on it. And we're just so tired all the time. So that was part of the contract. And then the living arrangements and the agreements that he had with his father worked out for them. But again, we have different schedules. We have a different lifestyle. It did not work out for us. So I had told him, I said, I need you to work 40 hours a week, have one full-time job or 2 part-time jobs or a part-time job, and go to school. If you do not have these things set in place, by the time it's time for you to move out, you cannot cross that threshold. You cannot walk into this house. Now, mind you, this wasn't a 2-week period either. We had known about this big move for, if not a year, maybe about 10 months. And we were communicating all the time. What's going on? When's the move coming? Is it still coming? So there was time for him to make, these things happen in place. And so it was brought up. What if I don't have this set in place? What if I don't have all the things that you want me to have? And I said, well, then I guess you're just going to end up in a homeless shelter. And that was really hard for me to say. That's really hard for me to admit right now, because, I wrote a letter and I didn't put that in the letter. But I want you to know, because I think it's important. It's important to talk about. And of course, when other people heard that, because, we're all sharing stories on my kid's doing this and my kid's doing that. And I'm like, well, my kid wants to move back in. And I told him if he didn't have all these things done, he had to go to a shelter. And at that time, I wasn't standing there all confident like this. I felt bad. I felt judged. But the thing is, people, they look at everything from a flat surface. Nobody understands that every different home, every different child, it's an iceberg. There's a whole bunch of dynamics, a whole bunch of things underneath that people take into consideration when they make these decisions with their kids. So without explaining to all these other moms, he had his savings. He did really good at that. There was a time when he and a girlfriend were going to move in together in another state. He had everything that he needed to start his life outside of my home. And so those are some of the things that I took in consideration. What am I doing if I let him back in? Because at this point, I felt like we were dealing with a failure to launch. And in the sense that I felt like he was scared. And so I thought, I'm not going to do him any good coming back here. And then once he moves back in, and let's say he doesn't do the things that he needs to do, how do I get him out? You can't, first of all, he's 6 foot something. You can't just pick him up and throw him out, and you can't force them to abide by your rules, so what do you do? So I was very, very, very distraught during this time. And it happened to be, I have maintenance appointments that I need to go to for my ADD like every 3 months. So that way they can make sure my dosage is right and things like that. And so my psychiatrist would always, how's it going at home? He always wrote notes. How's it going with so-and-so and so-and-so? And he really helped me understand and educated me on my ADD. Most people, if you don't know, think that it has to do with school and paying attention. But when you have ADD, it affects everything in your life. It affects relationships, your job, your self-esteem, everything. And so even the dosage that you have, like not when I was pregnant, because I didn't take it when I was pregnant, but after I had my son, I got back on it and he put me on a little dose. And then every 3 months he would be like, how's it going? And I've been on it for so long, I can tell when I need to move or go up. And, there was a time where, well, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're not doing anything, you're not working, so let's leave your dosage here. Okay, no problem. That's fine. Because if it's too much, then it doesn't work out either. I don't know. I've never had it too much. We've always stayed under. So I'm very fortunate to have the doctor that I had, but he was right, and then as I started having more work and I could feel like I couldn't bust through that ceiling. And when I would get really emotional, that's how I knew I needed to up my medication. But even to the point that if you have new people move into your house, if things change, if your schedule changes, because people on ADD need to have a very regimented schedule, they need, a routine. It's very, very helpful, by the way. And I thrive on routine. And so even one more person in your house changes everything, changes the dynamics in your head. So we're at this appointment and he's like, how's it going? What's going on? And I busted out crying. And I was so embarrassed because he's a psychiatrist. Like, they'll talk to you, they'll listen to you. I mean, I love the man. He was a great, great guy, but they're not a psychologist. They're not talk therapy. They don't, and I just busted out crying and I'm like, I'm dealing with this issue and my son wants to move back in and I don't think I'll be able to handle it. I just think it's going to make things crazy in trying to figure this out again, figure out a schedule. And I told him this, A, B, and C, and I feel horrible because everybody's telling me I'm awful. And, the jobs of psychiatrists and psychologists, it's not to tell you what to do. Their job is to help you critically think and help you come to your own. But I think he could see how desperate I was and how shitty I felt as a person, that he didn't necessarily tell me, but he validated what I was doing. And as he was very careful to walk around the subject, he said, there's something about when children move back in with their parents, everyone naturally falters back to old dynamics. And that resonated with me so strong because in times that I've had to be with my siblings and we've had to figure something out as a group, we're no longer sitting adult to we go back to brothers and sisters. And because brothers and sisters are intimidating and it's like we're children all over again, saying things that you wouldn't say to another adult and treating each other because we're siblings. And it is like mentally you go back in time to this time when you lived together and you don't think clearly. And so he was basically saying, if he comes back in and things are not set in place, you might just, do the same thing you do with your kids all the time. Okay, you have 3 more weeks. I'm telling you, you have 5 more weeks. All right, if you don't do this, and it turns back into this threatening and again, taking in consideration how much time was given and how we were dealing with this, I needed that validation because after that day, I stuck my feet in the ground and it is probably when it made it worse because I was like, okay, I am right. I know this is right. This is right for me. This is right for my home. And this is right for my son. It is good for him too, because I don't want to enable him. And if he is scared, then I want to help him and show him and guide him that it's okay. This is a new time in your life. It's okay. So the time came and we cut it really close. And I was still like, ugh. But he said, Mom, I'm moving to New York City. And I did not believe him at first because all this time we spent going back and forth with this and that, and, the little debates that we had, he's like, I'm just going to move to New York City. And I was like, okay, sure. But he did. He packed his bags and he moved to New York City. And we went to go see him within the year. And I can't tell you how proud of him I am. He came back to visit me or visit us maybe 6 months, and he was already a different person. And I know he is so much happier there too. Is he struggling? Sure. But he's that 20-something-year-old kind of struggling. You know what I mean? Is he nervous sometimes? I'm sure. He moved to a big city by himself. But thinking, and I even ask him now, could you imagine just living here, or would you ever come back and live here? And he's like, no. So at the end of the day, I did my job. Despite what anybody said. And my takeaway from all of that was, I have got to trust my instincts. Validation, oh my God, that feels good, right? It feels so good to be validated. But there's something about trusting yourself. And from that time on, and there's still other things in my life where I feel like I need validation. I'm working really hard to, have I considered all my options? Have I weighed this? Have I weighed that? To just trust myself. So right before he left, we got together and we had this great big dinner, and, we had our whole blended family together, and it was so beautiful, and it was such a great night. And he was fine, and we hugged and we kissed, and I love you, because like I said, he wouldn't, if he felt something towards me, I think he's always in the mindset of, that's my mom. What she says goes, and, I'm not going to change her mind, so whatever. But it scared me that he felt something, that he needed to know something, that we needed to talk about this. So that's why I wrote this letter. So the purpose of reading this letter and doing this episode on the specific letter for you is not to justify the things that I said, to the things that happen. It's not justification for me, because I'm good and I'm fine. And I've seen the results, and I can't be more happier, and I think he is too, on how the whole situation worked out. But today's purpose was, I hope this brings validation to you, that it's okay to trust your instincts, that it's okay to have your own set of rules or boundaries in your house, no matter how crazy or hard they may seem. And it's okay if you do ask others for their perspectives or what do they think, because that's what we do, because that's what sometimes we need. Sometimes we do hear things that we didn't think about, and it's very helpful. But I want you to know that it's okay if you share or you do ask somebody's opinion and you still think yours is the best. That's okay, because you know better. You know your house, and you know your kid. The themes addressed in this letter also aren't justifications. Sharing my background, my story with my son, it wasn't an excuse of, well, I'm a hard mom because my mom was a hard mom. It's not that. It was about creating a deeper understanding of where I came from and the experiences that did shape me. By being open and honest about my background, it helped me to reflect on some things, to change where I needed to change, to forgive myself where I needed to forgive myself. Because I don't look at my actions as personal failures, but a result as my personal growth. As, like I said, a daughter, a woman, a mother, a friend, a wife. And as I look at all these, these themes that I didn't even recognize that I was writing, I just wrote this to write this. And as I was preparing this episode, I realized that there are themes within this letter. And thinking about parenting's, it's like a framework. And if you practice Stoic philosophy, then you completely understand what I mean. There's no right or wrong way. And I think when a lot of people come into parenting, they come into it with these rigid rules of we have to do this and it is right or die and I have to help my child no matter what. But there's so many different forms of help. And I don't think that we can, especially when it comes to, it's not just our kids, to our loved ones, right? There's so many different forms of help. We can't see that. We can't see beyond. All we think is, okay, come here, let me put all this on me. And not even thinking that, because I don't think a lot of us realize, and we're like, okay, let me help you. I can't let you suffer. We forget that it doesn't just affect one person. It affects everyone. It affects them. It affects you. It affects whoever else is in your house. It affects your schedule. It affects your whole life. And so I realized, in looking all this, and then as I do my work in putting together how I practice Stoic philosophy and how it works out in my life, and it's not even like I make these exercises on, okay, how I'm going to do this as a parent. Like, my practice naturally bleeds into all the parts of my life. And so just like there's pillars in Stoic philosophy, I have pillars in the framework of how I parent. And my pillars, they're built on honesty and communication, self-reflection for continuous improvement. Accountability, breaking generational cycles, adaptation to change, and then the art of letting go. These principles have served as my compass. They have allowed me to create a nurturing, seemingly at the time, nurturing environment. And then I grow up in the next 5 years and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's one thing, my poor kid. I like I said in the letter, I have, and we'll get to that. I have grown. There's some things that I've done to this poor child, or I've said to this poor child, and he'll see me with my little one now, and he's like, hey mom, remember when you used to, or like, we should do this because you used to do that. And I'm like, dude, I'm grown up now. I don't do that shit anymore. Like, so it is, I'm ever changing, and information's always changing, and we're growing and we're learning. And so I've done my best to, like I said, use these pillars as a compass, as to create the best environment that I can at the time with the information that I have. And so I mentioned for this show that there's 4 in the letter. So today we're only going to address 2, which are honesty and communication and self-reflection, the importance of self-reflection, which is something you hear me talk a lot about. Honesty and communication, honestly, that's one of the core tenets. That is my philosophy of life. And for those of you who know me, when times are hard and conversations are the most uncomfortable, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about this. I can't leave it inside to fester. I don't know if it's from what happened with my dad. I don't know if it's how I grew up, because communication wasn't really good in my house, but I have to talk about it. And my children are my most valued, prized relationships, most especially with them. We're going to talk about it. And let me just tell you what I learned with boys. I don't want to hear most times. And I'm still learning how to communicate effectively as I'm raising men. I even bought a book, Strong Mothers, Strong Sons. Get that book if you're struggling with your son, because apparently your children, your male children, they hear you the same way that husbands do. Wah, 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 wah. Apparently, we have to drive that point in there. And that's, I don't know. So I'm learning, and like, I'll give you one example. Boys, they take in information when you're doing things with them. Like when dads are playing baseball, they get messages in there. And so like, if you want to talk to your son about this, take him bowling. Like if you're doing an activity with him, but don't drive that nail home, and don't. So that's some of the stuff that I've been working on, and I'm learning still, which is also why I wrote a letter, because sometimes communication's hard. It's hard, and when emotions are involved, and you can be so disciplined, but not, you just can't help it. You're a human. And so for me, text is good. Now, don't break up with people in text, but when you're trying to explain yourself to someone, or you want someone to hear you, I feel that emails and letters, and alternatively be open for them to write you back. And if you need to communicate, I mean, that's just one way that it's unconventional, but I have found that writing letters helps me take my time, helps me get things out, and then I can read over what I wrote. And if I'm like, ooh, that's fucked up, you probably shouldn't say that. So I wrote this letter because, again, it was how I could communicate things to him, and I could be very careful with what I said, but also for him, because if he doesn't, he could take his time reading that. When I read stuff from my dad at 33 years old, I probably wouldn't have been ready for all that at 20. So this letter wasn't just meant for him to take this and digest this now. It was written under the understanding that it may take him some time to digest some of this. He may not agree with that. He might not agree with any of this, but maybe he will later on. So in this letter, I included my background because I wanted him to understand that everyone has a story that informs their choices. And knowing mine and having the ability to look at me like a human, like a woman, instead of a mother that we place on the pedestals, because I have to say, I did the same thing to my mom. You're a mom. How could you do that? Never once in my life did I think, oh, what has happened in her life that has informed or shaped the way that she makes decisions, the way that she makes choices. And when we put our parents on those pedestals and we don't think about anything else other than how could you do that to me? I'm your child. We get let down hard by our own expectations. It's not fair, and it's fine. I don't need him to forgive me in that moment. I don't need him to accept what I've done and be okay with it, because sometimes things that our parents do, it's not okay. It's not an excuse. I'm not giving him excuses why I did certain things when he was younger. But I want him to be able to make a choice, an informed decision on how he feels about me, whether he understands he has that information now or not. Because expectations that we have for other people, that's a killer. It ruins relationships, and it can cause a whole lot of problems. And this is not just about the parent-child, child-parent. This is about all relationships. This is about how you view your significant other. This is about how you view your best friend. We need to take in consideration where they came from, their background, instead of getting personal or taking things personal, thinking, or, just whatever title they have to. You're my best friend. You shouldn't have done that to me. Or you're my husband. How could you? We need to step back and remember to look at people like they're humans, like they're men, like they're women. And they had experiences that we may not even ever know about. They may never tell us about. So we need to try to understand. And then self-reflection, that's just for my continuous improvement and accountability. There was a time that I had to tell him, because again, as a kid, there's certain things that stand out that you want to remind your mom all the time, and you want to poke her and remember when you did this and remember when you did that. And I've dealt with all those demons, and I've gone over all those things, all those memories. I probably remember things that he doesn't remember. And so seeing that he's still hurt, that my actions have caused some sort of suffering in his life, the only thing that I could say, and I told him, was, I am sorry. I am sorry for the things that I did. I'm sorry for how that affected you in your growing. But I can't go back. You can't go back. We can't, other than verbally. I can't go back and fix that. All I can do is take everything that you said, take everything that I see that I did wrong, and just be better going forward. Maybe I wasn't the mom that I should have been back then, but I will be the parent that I need to be moving forward. And I don't know how well or if that sank in with him, but Again, in any relationship, that's all we can do. And even for yourself, if you're thinking about things from the past, because I think that's one of the biggest problems that we do to ourselves. We ruminate. We ruminate on our mistakes, and we make ourselves live our mistakes over and over again. Our parents' mistakes, our significant others' mistakes. Like, stop. We have got to stop. Either we accept those things and move forward, or we be like, nah, I'm not having that shit, and be done with those people. But there's nothing else you can do but go forward. Looking back does nothing. It does not help you at all. And so that's where I leave you with today. Like I said, there's a lot. There's a lot here. There's a lot to go over, a lot that went on, and a lot to sink in if you're dealing with something like this. And so I hope that I brought you a little bit of relief, a little less rumination, and a lot more validation that you're okay. It's okay. We all go through this. It doesn't look the same in your house. It doesn't look the same in mine, but it's going to be okay. And if it's not, you're going to figure it out. As always, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here with me today. I really appreciate it, especially for this most intimate and hard topic of conversation to have, but I need to talk about it. We needed to talk about it. So I hope it helps somehow. Until next time. Bye.